Hi, this is Jill from Fabric Garden, and today I want to talk to everyone who is participating in the Santa and Me block of the month. I want to give you a quick run over on how to get started and how to prep to make your first block. So I will get started here. Your kit will contain your pattern cover so that you will be able to see how your entire quilt is going to come out. And we will be making block 1. You'll have to excuse my picture. I had a little coffee incident and I did not have my Bounty Quicker Picker Upper, so I've got a little coffee stain there. So your kit has your pattern cover, which over on the right hand side has wool and floss information. Then you will have a sheet that has all the wool applique pieces already reversed for you to trace them onto the paper of your fusible web. You will also have a full-size layout, so this is actual block size, and you will have 2 general instruction sheets that are for the entire kit. So, your background piece in your kit is a larger piece. It's 12 by 16. It is larger than necessary because sometimes as you applique and embroider, your background fabric may shrink a little bit. So once you're done, these can be trimmed to 10.5 by 14.5. I usually wait till I have all my blocks stitched and then I trim them all at one time. So to start, first thing you should do is get your wool prepped. So you will take your fusible web. I recommend Soft Fuse, but you could use Steam-A-Seam Light or some other lightweight fusible. And it's hard for you to see on the video, but the shapes are separated by little tiny dotted lines that show you the size of the wool. So you will trace by the wool color. You will rough cut out your shapes. I've got a little piece here that I can show you as an example. Here's the little piece with the stars, and I have traced that and I have fused it, just rough cut it out as one piece and fused it onto my wool. Now with fusible, you fuse it onto the wrong side of your fabric. Wool really doesn't have a wrong side, so you can decide which side of the wool you think is prettier, call that your right side, and fuse to the other side. Once you have all your pieces fused to the appropriate piece of wool, then you will cut out exactly on the lines. And you will notice I have not cut this piece out yet. These pieces that have the very tiny pieces, I like to wait and cut these out right before I put them on. I don't know about you, but these little circles are about 1/4 inch, and I worry that I will lose them if I cut them out too soon before I'm ready for them. So I just put all my wool pieces in a baggie, and the little pieces I leave uncut until I'm ready for them. So once your wool is ready, you can take your life-size piece and your background and head to a light box or a window. If you don't have a good spot for tracing, if you're close by, you're welcome to drop in the shop and use our light box. But you will lay your pattern face up on your light box and you will lay your background. And at this point, you can trace your embroidery that is on the background fabric. You can peel the paper backing off of your wool and arrange those onto the background. Make sure that you are tracing with a Micron Pigma pen, because we will be hitting this with the iron multiple times to add wool. If you trace with a friction pen, the moment you hit your piece with the iron, your tracing will be gone. So you'll need to work with a more permanent, either you could even use a mechanical pencil, but I like the Micron Pigma pen. Either an 005 or an 01 is a good size. Nice and thin. So once I've got these things laid out, I will often take a big ruler, slip it under my piece, and gently go to the ironing board, put this on, remove my ruler and my paper, and get my wool fused. When I have this many pieces of wool, I fuse oftentimes in layers. So I fused my house and my roof and my trees, my cup, but I came back after I got those things stitched down and added the door and the window and the heart, and I will add the little stars here next. So you'll get your bigger pieces of wool fused on. And then the next step is to, and it doesn't matter which order you do this, but I kind of like to get my wool stitched down so it can't come unfused and go anywhere, is whip stitch the wool in place. I want you to use a matching thread. It can be, I like to use one strand of floss, but you could even use a regular thread for your sewing machine. The idea is for the thread that you're whip stitching your wool down with to blend and not show a lot. So you will want to just try to match as best as possible your wool and whip stitch in place. Going back one little step, whenever the wool pieces go together, like the house and the roof, you should have a little overlap. Don't just butt the edges of the wool up together. Have a little 1/8 or 1/4 inch overlap of the pieces. And that is indicated in your pattern with a dashed line. You'll see where you should do an overlap. Once you've got your wool, your big pieces of wool stitched down, now you can come back and do your embroidery. We are really doing back stitch, lazy daisy, and a few French knots this time. And once I've done all the main pieces of wool, the embroidery on the background, now I'm going to come back and I'm going to do the embroidery that is on top of the wool. What you will find at this point is you will not be able to trace this with a light box. So there are two ways you can get this, the wording and things transferred to your wool. The pattern in your general instructions, they have one called Marking Images to Stitch on Wool, and she talks about using a water-soluble stabilizer. That would be something, a product like Transfer-Ease, which is a paper-backed that has, when you peel it away, this piece is water-soluble. You could either trace this on a light box or it will actually run through an inkjet printer, but we're just doing little pieces. I would just hand trace. The con about this is that you have to wet your block to get this off. And I have found you have to get it pretty wet to get this off. So I'm going to show you one of my little techniques. Just go to your grocery store and get some Glad press and seal. If you haven't used this before, it's a kind of semi-transparent, and it's a little tacky on one side and not on the other. And you can tear off a piece of this, and it is a little sticky, so you kind of got to, look there, I've got it messed up, but just gently pull it back apart. And you can lay that right down on the paper. And at this point, you would trace your embroidery. Do not use an ink pen because you're going to stitch through this, and ballpoint pen is, you wouldn't want that to get on your needle and then onto your wool. But because it never really dries all the way. But if you used a Sharpie or your Micron Pigment pen, that will dry, it will be solid, and it won't transfer to your wool. Once you have transferred the embroidery to your transferees, you just bring it back over and lay it on top of your wool, and you'll stitch right through it. And you can see it's nice, you can see your wool, it's easy, and then it tears very easily. Once you've done your stitching, you'll just hold where you stitched with your fingers and tear the transferees off. And I have found this works very nicely for me. I don't have to get my block wet, and it works well. So once I have done my stitching on my wool, I am going to come back and do those little tiny pieces. The reason I don't fuse those tiny pieces on while I'm doing all the stitching is that while you stitch, this piece gets kind of wadded up into your hand for you to get to the different places. A piece of wool that's only a 1/4 inch only has a little tiny bit of fusible on the back, and sometimes those pieces will just fall off. They just won't stay fused for you. So I will fuse them right before I'm going to stitch them. I'll stitch them down and my block will be done. So it's time to get to work. You should all have your kits by now and be ready to start stitching. If you have any questions, please call the shop at 916-483-2955 and ask for Jill. I love to give you a hand if you've got a question. If you're close by, you can drop in and I can demonstrate anything you need demonstrated. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to hanging this in my entryway this Christmas. So happy stitching. Thank you.